"Welcome home," a voice greeted me. When I returned from work, the last person I expected to see was my ex-husband, who had vanished 3 years ago. "You're always late, making your husband wait. I'm starving. Is dinner ready yet?" he complained as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My ex-husband had barged into my house and brazenly made these comments. Memories from 3 years ago came flooding back. The image of him dumping all the household chores on me, unfairly shouting at me, stating me up on our wedding anniversary trip, and then disappearing, all resurfaced in my mind. And now, here he was right before my eyes. The man I despised from the bottom of my heart was standing in front of me. The voice that came out of my mouth was surprisingly cold. "Who are you?" I asked. He just stared at me, looking surprised. "My name is Hazel, and I'm turning 30 this year. These days, I lead a peaceful life as a company employee, but I have a past involving my husband, Steve, whom I married when I was 25. I met Steve through a friend's introduction. He was a salesperson with a manly character, the exact opposite of my quiet and reserved self. I was drawn to him because he had qualities I lacked, and so we started dating. In the second year of our relationship, I accepted Steve's marriage proposal. After we registered our marriage, we began our married life in an apartment that my parents gave us as a wedding gift. Everything seemed fine until then. However, after getting married, Steve's attitude changed drastically. During our dating period, he spoke kindly to me and gave me presents. But after marriage, he stopped all of that. Despite both of us working, he made me do all the housework. He left his dirty laundry everywhere, scattered trash around, and didn't even thank me for preparing meals. He refused to do even minor chores like taking out the trash. After living with him for about a month, I reached my limit and decided to talk to Steve one day. "Hey Steve, we're both working. Can't you help a little with the housework?" I asked. Steve sighed as if he were tired. "You know we're married, right, Hazel?" "Yeah, but it's common sense that the wife does the housework after marriage." I couldn't hide my surprise at Steve's outrageous words. "That's not true. These days, it's common for both parties to share the workload." "What? You want your husband to work at home too? You're such a nagging wife. If you don't want to be called that, you better do your job properly," Steve retorted and turned to watch TV. I couldn't say anything and continued doing all the housework. A year passed since our marriage, and I became accustomed to managing everything on my own. Steve began saying he was busy with work, coming home late, and even working on weekends. There were times when I realized we hadn't had a decent conversation for 2 weeks. One day, when he happened to come home early, I hesitantly started a conversation with him. "Hey Steve, are you still busy with work?" "Yeah, kind of," he replied. "You've been coming home after midnight recently, and you don't seem to have any days off. Maybe it's better if you change your job?" "Stay out of my business," Steve suddenly yelled, surprising me and making me step back in shock. "I am sorry. I just worry about your health. You don't need to say unnecessary things. Leave me alone." From that point on, Steve followed a pattern of returning home late, sleeping, and leaving early in the morning. We hadn't done anything together for months, like going out on weekends. At this rate, our relationship would fall apart. I had to do something. Filled with anxiety, I came up with a plan. When he returned home one evening, I asked, "Hey Steve, isn't our anniversary during the upcoming holidays?" "Yeah, I guess," he replied gruffly as he removed his tie. Not discouraged, I proposed, "Keep that date free. Let's go on a trip together." "A trip?" "Yes, wouldn't it be nice? I'll cover the costs, please." Steve thought about it for a while, then finally agreed. "All right, I'll keep the day free." "That's great. I'll plan everything." And so, Steve and I decided to go on a trip for our anniversary. I hoped this trip could rekindle the bond that had been gradually fading between us. With this in mind, I thoroughly researched and made all our travel arrangements. A few weeks later, the day of the trip arrived. Steve hadn't returned home since he went to work the day before. Our departure was scheduled for 10 a.m., and time was quickly running out. In a panic, I called him repeatedly but couldn't reach him. Finally, in the afternoon, Steve called. "Ho! We're supposed to go on a trip today, right? Where are you?" I asked urgently. "Ah, sorry, work is running late," he replied. "We have a check-in time. We should leave soon. Can you go ahead and check in for us? I'll catch up." "Really? You're actually coming, right?" "I told you I would. Bye," he said, ending the call abruptly. I was left dumbfounded. The check-in time was approaching and I needed to leave immediately. I had hoped to check in with Steve and explore the area together after arriving, but despite my hopes, I headed to our destination alone. When I checked into the hotel, they seemed surprised to see me alone. Naturally, as I'd made a reservation for two, I explained that my husband would be arriving later and was then shown to our room. Outside the window, it had started to rain, as if reflecting my feelings. I waited for Steve's arrival for a while, but even after 1 hour, then 2 hours, he didn't show up. Worse yet, he didn't even call. At this rate, our dinner reservation would be missed. After several unsuccessful attempts to call Steve, I was only connected to voicemail. In the end, I swallowed my embarrassment and asked the hotel to prepare dinner for one, which I ate alone. The meal was lavishly prepared with great spirit, but no matter how exquisite the food, it felt empty without Steve's presence. What I tasted had no flavor. My vision blurred repeatedly with tears. When the hotel staff asked what to do with the cake adorned with a happy anniversary plate, all I could say was, "Please discard it." That day, I ended up staying at my travel destination alone. Although I had a sightseeing tour planned for the next day, I canceled it and hurried home. At that time, I thought something might have happened to Steve. "I'm home. Steve, are you back?" I called out as I entered the house. The room was silent, with no sign of anyone. I dropped my luggage and glanced at the dining table. There, I found divorce papers signed by Steve and our wedding ring. "What? What is this? What is going on?" I exclaimed. I searched for a letter but found nothing. Looking around the house, it was clear all his belongings were gone. Everything had been moved out. Stunned, I could only sit down on the spot. When I came to my senses, I immediately contacted my mother-in-law. She lived far away, and we had only met a few times, but she was a kind woman who treated me kindly. When I explained the situation, my mother-in-law was also astounded. She had no report from him, and he didn't seem to have gone to his parents' house either. When I called Steve's office after the holiday, I was told a shocking fact. Mr. Smith resigned last month. "What?" I exclaimed. "We've been trying to reach him too, but we haven't been able to get through since yesterday. Could you please tell him to contact us as soon as possible?" they asked. I ended my call with Steve's workplace in a daze. Next, I pulled out my cell phone and called Steve, but all I heard was, "The number you dialed is currently not in use." And so, Steve vanished abruptly. After going through various processes, I submitted the signed divorce papers and forcibly ended our married life. Time passed, and about 3 years went by. I have remarried and now live a peaceful life. Of course, I was initially distraught, but now I hardly ever think about my ex-husband. It's true what they say, time heals all wounds. As usual, when I came home alone after work, I noticed something strange. The lights in the house were on. That's odd. Did I forget to turn off the lights this morning? As I reached for the doorknob, I noticed the front door was unlocked. What's more, there was a pair of ragged men's sneakers that I didn't recognize at the entrance. A wave of tension ran through me, and I was about to pull out my cell phone to call the police when a familiar face appeared at the entrance. "Oh, welcome home, Hazel." "What?" I gasped. The person standing there was none other than Steve, my vanished ex-husband. I was surprised and speechless. Without paying any attention to me, Steve brazenly said, "You're late coming home as usual. You've kept your husband waiting." "I'm hungry. Is dinner ready yet?" Steve's casual inquiry triggered a flood of memories from 3 years ago. The audacity of Steve, unloading all the household chores on me as if it were my duty, yelling at me unreasonably, stating me up on our wedding anniversary trip, and then disappearing off the face of the earth. Now he was standing right in front of me, the man I hated from the bottom of my heart. The voice that escaped from my mouth was surprisingly icy. "Who are you, huh?" Steve, taken aback, stared at me. Returning his gaze sharply, I said, "Leave now, or I'll call the cops." "Whoa, wait a minute. You can't tell me you've forgotten your husband's face," Steve retorted with a smug grin. Upon closer inspection, he had put on weight, let his hair and beard grow out, and looked utterly unkempt compared to 3 years ago. Holding back my growing disgust, I retorted without mercy, "Stay back. What do you mean by husband? Come on, we're married, aren't we? You haven't forgotten just because we haven't seen each other for a while, have you?" "What are you talking about? I filed for divorce a long time ago. We're strangers," I stated firmly. At that, Steve's face looked like he had been struck by lightning. His eyes wide open, his mouth agape, he stammered, "Why would you do such a thing? You left divorce papers signed by yourself, didn't you?" I countered. What? You took it seriously. Did you really submit it? Steve looked flustered, playing the victim. I glared at the flustered Steve with a disgusted look. Is that a problem? Of course, it's a problem. I didn't intend to divorce at all. What? I thought you would wait for me. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. My patience had run out with Steve, who was playing the victim. What do you mean? I thought you would wait for me. After all, it was you who abandoned everything 3 years ago to move in with your mistress, wasn't it? I pointed out. When I said that, Steve once again looked astonished. Soon after, he disappeared. I hired a private investigator to locate him half a year after he left. The investigator found him, and the report I received was beyond imagination. About 6 months before he disappeared, he had been having an affair with a coworker. Apparently, their relationship was an open secret at the office. In the end, he and the other woman quit their jobs and started living together in the neighboring state. Upon hearing this, I immediately filed for divorce. My love and affection for him were completely exhausted. I had been living, trying not to recall the past, yet now he appears before me, even having the audacity to barge into my house. I deeply regretted not having changed the locks. No, Hazel, you got it all wrong, Steve pleaded. What's there to misunderstand? I've gathered all the evidence through a PI. Go back to her, I retorted angrily. That's not possible. We broke up. We've been fighting a lot recently. I don't care about her anymore. Hazel, you're the only one for me, my ex-husband pathetically clung to my arm. I shook him off, my face full of disgust. I've told you, you're not my husband. How dare you dictate to me, a stranger to you? I only love you, right? Let's start over our married life. Let's go to the city hall now and reapply for our marriage certificate. Come on, let's get moving. Steve tugged at my arm. This is hopeless. He's not understanding a word, I thought. Just as I took out my cell phone to call the police, the front door swung open. Who might you be? Let go of her. A commanding voice interrupted. Steve, taken aback, slackened his grip. I instantly ran towards the source of the voice. What the? Who are you? Steve asked. My husband, I replied, clinging to my returning husband. He gently soothed me and addressed Steve in a low voice. You're Steve Smith, right? Hazel's ex-husband. Yes, that's me, Steve replied, bewildered. But you, her husband, son. Steve doesn't comprehend the situation, so I'll lay it out for him, my husband said firmly. I've been remarried for a while now, which is why I've been telling you that you're a stranger. My new husband, John Collins, is a colleague from work. Apparently, he has been interested in me since we joined the company. At first, he gave up because I was married, but once he learned of my divorce, he started to make his move. Initially wary of men, I didn't accept his feelings. However, as I got to know John's earnest and sincere character, I gradually let him in. Upon hearing my circumstances, John looked me in the eyes and said, I will never leave you alone, Hazel. I promise to protect you for the rest of my life. Will you please marry me? Tearfully, I accepted his proposal, and I have been moving forward, forgetting the past. When Steve Cox arrived, John's stern face made him recoil. As Steve tried to flee towards the entrance, I stopped him. Hold it right there, I said. Trembling with fear, Steve looked back at us. You're going to be paying alimony. It's not beyond the statute of limitations yet, so you will pay for your infidelity. I'm not working now. I don't have any money, Steve stammered. I couldn't care less. If you don't pay, I'll take you to court. Remember that, John said, glaring at Steve. Steve apologized and ran off with his tail between his legs. In the quiet room, I apologized to my husband. I'm sorry about all this. I never thought he would show up after all this time. It's okay. It must have shocked you too, Hazel. From now on, let me know if something happens. I'll protect you with everything I've got, John said, embracing me. Later on, it seems Steve returned to his parents' home. My former mother-in-law contacted me and agreed to pay the alimony in one lump sum. According to her, Steve will now work off his debt to her by toiling away on their family farm. I do hope the proud and selfish Steve changes his ways and works honestly, but I never want to be involved with him again. Learning from this experience, I moved to a new apartment. In fact, I recently found out that I am pregnant with my current husband, who is truly happy about my pregnancy. I'm sure we'll be able to build a happy family.